Chapter 10. The music in the salon changed to urban grooves, a local bastardized form of hip-hop with no artistic merit. When Doomy first brought it in, I thought it was a one-off. Soon the imitation synthesized beats were playing every day. Nobody seemed to mind except me. The artists with names like Maskiri, Wallum Tight, Rakwi, Extra Large, singers who I'd paid no attention to in the past, now dominated the salon's airwaves. The music was like listening to old pans smashed together by a 3-year-old. This music has no lyrical content at all. You're not listening to them. They're talking about love, hustling for money in these tough times, unity, small houses, everyday life, and with themes that are relevant to the youths of today. Doomy stepped up to defend his music. You can't even hear what they're saying underneath those phony American accents. You can't hear what those Roomba artists you love are saying either. At least their music is part of our culture. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you're saying that artists from the DRC are expressing our culture, but kids who grew up in these streets are not. I find that absurd to say the least. He pursed his lips in a way I found disgusting. He couldn't understand what Roomba music is. He couldn't understand that Roomba music is universal and crosses the barriers of language, space, and time. When Awilo Longomba sings about love, you feel it. When he is sad, you become sad with him. Now I had to endure that damn urban grooves that made my head ache. Still, today was at least the first Tuesday of the month, and Trina was coming. We all looked forward to her monthly visits. It was not long before the rumble of her diesel pickup could be heard from the street. That car sounded more like a grinding mill than a form of transport. She pulled in and parked just in front of the doors. Her tall white frame stepped out of the car. She was wearing sunglasses. In fact, I had never seen her without a pair. Khaki trousers and shirt she wore underlined her lack of dress sense for someone who was only in her early 30s. Makadini Madzimai, she greeted us in a full Zezuru accent. Tiripo Makadini, we all said like a primary school choir. There was never a time when we spoke to her in English. For all we knew, she might not even been able to speak the language. The freckles on her face said she was one of us and had been basking in the glory of the same sun for far too long. It's Mrs. Kumalo, and she made a big order, and I have to make sure I've got everything right. You just missed her, but I know what she ordered, Agnes said, stepping outside. They returned with 2 full boxes of hair care products. There's also the human hair if you bought it. I couldn't get any, but I had some synthetic instead if you want it, Trina said, shrugging her shoulders. It'll have to do then, replied Agnes as Trina returned for another box full. The 2 of them counted the stock and verified that it was correct. It was reassuring to know that we had supplies for the next coming month. Mostly it was dark and lovely together with Revlon because we could source the low-quality stuff locally. Agnes went back inside the house and returned with 6 2-liter bottles of cooking oil. She continued back and forth until she had loaded 24 of them into the truck. Trina rarely took money when she could help it. Further down the line, she would trade the cooking oil for something else, petrol perhaps, or even bales of toilet paper. Anything was better than carrying around large stacks of notes. She had once been in farming. Together with her husband, they had owned 2 farms, one in Beatrice, which he had inherited from her father, and another just outside the city along Chinhoyi Road, which belonged to her husband, Derek Price. When the land reform program began, they were quick to give up the farm in Beatrice in the hope that they would be allowed to keep Good Hope Farm, in which they grew tobacco and other cash crops. This gesture had seen them through the first wave of invasions, and they had even received a letter from the government telling them they would be allowed to stay. It was almost a miracle as they had seen their other neighbors picked off one by one. Then, just a year ago, a powerful minister had taken a liking to their green oasis that was now surrounded by vast, deteriorating farms. They had been to court and won an injunction preventing the seizure of their farm. But then the war vets arrived. Their workers were beaten, livestock slaughtered, and their home ransacked. They fled and could not return. This government minister, it was rumored, already had 8 farms, which everyone knew about, and still wanted more. When Trina spoke, you could hear the echo of a plea, a sort of longing to be away from the bustle of the city, which must have been a culture shock for a girl who had grown up in wide open spaces. There was a kind of deliberateness in her gestures and a weariness to the way she carried herself. Perhaps she'd hoped that one day they would win their farm back. If she did, she never said a thing to us. They'd bought a house in Harare, and now her husband made a living selling cars that they had shipped from overseas. When she went with him to the port in Durban, she bought the supplies for businesses around the city and became something of a legend. Her success came from keeping her word, something we could never hope for from any of our other suppliers. I brought some presents for you girls, she said, peering into her car and coming out with some brightly colored packets that we strained to make out from afar. She toyed with us for a bit, trying to make us guess what they were. You can't believe how we all shrieked with joy when she finally revealed that they were packs of tampons. I had been using cotton balls for 4 months. It was as bad as that, and I considered myself lucky to have them. There were no pads in the shops. We had we had all scoured the city. I knew of other women using rags that they would then wash and reuse, and shuddered at the prospect that one day I might be compelled to follow suit. She had one packet left in her hand when she asked, "Where's Patricia?" She was fired. "Oh," she said, cupping her mouth. "I'm her replacement, but somehow I don't think those will do me any good." Doomy promptly introduced himself. Before she had a chance to speak, he went over and touched her hair. "You're a mess." Trina went over to the mirror and ran her hand through her hair. "It's not so bad. Look at it. This just won't do. Sit in this chair." He literally forced her into the chair. "I don't mean to be rude, but have you ever worked with hair like mine?" she protested, trying to squirm out as he held her down. "Madame, even if you were a baboon, I would still style you. I work with all types of hair." He shampooed and conditioned her, untangling her frizzy hair. He ran a comb through and tried to style her before he decided that she would do well with simply tying it back in a ponytail. "We need to straighten it, and I can imagine putting a few blonde highlights in it. Pity we don't have the dye or the straighteners to work with. If you can get me the materials I need, I guarantee I'll make you look so hot your husband will not recognize you. God, it's been ages since I've been in a salon. Tell me what you need, and maybe next month I'll come around with some products and you can style me." Doomy wrote down a list of what he wanted her to bring along for the next visit. He was adamant that it would be on the house since she was our supplier. We watched her walk back to the car, her usual step replaced by swaying hips. It was the most feminine I'd ever seen her. She drove off, and I stashed my tampons in my handbag. I could have willed my period. If I could have willed my period on, I would have, knowing that I had these. At that time, though, none of us could have known that Doomy's little stunt was going to have some devastating ramifications for the salon and our relations with Trina.